How long did Jim Crowe last? Join Epic Kate and Miss Andrea as we discuss American history. Hello, this is Miss Andrea, and today I want to introduce you to a friend who I'm doing a collaboration with. She is known by the name Epic Kate.
Hi Andrea, I'm so excited to be on your channel. Thank you for this opportunity.
I found her on a different social media site when the COVID first started. We were both spending time on that site, and when I got bored of that site, I followed her here to YouTube, and we've been having lots of great conversations. And as that weird thing that happens in social media world, you just find people that you really consider a friend, even though you have never met them in real life, and you warn your children against doing that, but yet still you make good friends. So Kate, tell us about yourself, where you live, where you're from, and how you ended up there.
Hi, I'm Katie. I am originally from Utah in the US, and I live on an island of Sweden called Gotland. And I'm married to a Swede. We have two 4-year-old girls, twins. I was a missionary for 12-ish years with the theater company. I traveled all over the world, saw a lot of things, performed in a lot of places, and we've been living here for the last few years. After having this adventurous, full-time on-the-road traveling life and then being home with twins, I needed an outlet, and I was so happy when I discovered YouTube. I just love making videos, saving beautiful memories, processing my struggles, learning, growing, sharing poetry. I just love to connect with people too. So it's so cool to meet other creators and to talk and to grow together. I love it. Funnily enough, my day job is working at an American 1950s themed diner. And I'm calling out numbers, and I'm serving people food, and I'm bussing tables, and I'm sweating like a pig. Just the glamorous life. I ended up in Sweden because I married a Swede. And we met in Germany, and he's from this island. And it's so much better than the mainland of Sweden, so jackpot!
We're going to have a conversation about history in America. What were you taught in school about Christopher Columbus?
What was I taught in school about Christopher Columbus? It was so long ago. I graduated in 2004. I recall something about requesting money and aid to go, and it was some queen or other, and I remember having to write the names of the ships, which I don't remember. This is it. I know now that there's a lot more to the story, and that he was a craptastic person, did a lot of craptastic things, that is. So looking forward to learning more about all of this stuff.
So when I was in school, elementary school, Catholic, somewhere around middle school ages, I learned the rhyme. In 1942, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. He took 3 boats, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, to the United States, discovered land. Everything was great. The end. But there are things that you need to know about Christopher Columbus. The name of the boats weren't even the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. True story. And I'll get them for you. Okay. So the Pinta was a nickname for the painted one, or the word prostitute. The Nina was actually named the Santa Clara, but its owner's name was Juan Nino. And although the Santa Maria, we got that one correct, its nickname was La Galicia or La Galiga, as it was built in the province of Galicia. It was built in the province of Galicia. The Santa Maria was wrecked on the voyage. It hit a coral reef in the northern coast of Hispaniola, Haiti. And the crew had to salvage the cargo. He returned to Spain aboard the Nina, but he had left 40 crew members behind to start the settlement. And when he returned, none of them were alive. So when the Santa Maria wrecked, there wasn't enough room for all the sailors to go back, because they only had 2 boats left. Plus, he had invited 6 Indians to go back to Spain with him, and there wasn't enough room for all of them in the Nina. Invited means forcible removal of indigenous people from their homes to be made into slaves, just FYI. So he left them behind because there wasn't room in the boats, but it was to start a settlement. And when he did return, because he returned several times, they were no longer alive. The net of it is that Christopher Columbus enslaved and mutilated indigenous people. He landed on the island of Hispaniola and encountered an indigenous people group called the Taino. They were friendly. They traded jewelry, animals, and supplies with the sailors. They were strong. They were attractive. He wrote in his diary. He wrote in his diary, they do not carry arms or know them. They would be good servants. So they were enforced into slavery. And if they didn't cooperate, they would lose a limb or be killed. When the Spanish monarchs got wind that he had been flogging and executing the natives of Hispaniola without a trial, he was arrested, chained up, and brought back to Spain. Some of the charges apparently were a little trumped up, but he admitted to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella that he had done these things, and he was stripped of his title of governor. So, as my adult daughter puts it, Columbus was a bit of an idiot and just a horrible person who, landed on somebody's land and murdered and mutilated them all. Yeah, so that's what Christopher Columbus did. What were you taught in school about slavery?
What was I taught about slavery? Not much. Like, we knew that it was a thing, and we knew that people were packed onto ships and not treated well. But we mostly focused on things like Abraham Lincoln abolishing slavery.
So slavery has been super sanitized for the history books. They like to paint the slaves that they took from their land as savages and unsophisticated. They like to say that they helped them by giving them productive work to do and, feeding and caring for them. They like to just say, it was a long time ago. It's okay. It's fine. We don't do that anymore. The truth about slavery is that it was so brutal. And they somehow used religion to justify it. And they absolutely used religion to control it. They would give them Sundays off, and they would let one of the slaves, they pick who he was, and they let him be the preacher. So, they would go through and pick slaves here and there to kind of control the rest of the slaves. They did that with indentured servants. First they had them controlling the slaves. And, they would use different, very subdued black people to also keep control of slaves because there were more slaves than slave owners, which is wild because I wouldn't. Okay, there was the whole baby factory deal that was just the most difficult for me to understand. They'd pick strong women and they'd pick strong men. Just like they do cattle, they would pick the buck and they would have him forcibly impregnate as many of the female slaves as possible, because if a slave was born to you, then it was yours and you didn't have to pay for it. So there was a whole baby factory thing going on there. Okay? And then the masters would also rape women because they could only have light-skinned slaves working in the house. So they would rape women to create these light-skinned slaves, so that they could take care of their actual legitimate children in the house. And then there was the whole breastfeeding deal too. It's just crazy where the women can only breastfeed their own children on one side or not at all and let some of their children perish because they had to save their milk for the white baby, and you couldn't put a black child's lips on the same breast as a white child's lips. So that was just treatment of women. Watch or read Roots, because it is the truest depiction you're going to find. When I was homeschooling my kids, when we got to slavery, in the text, I stopped the lessons and I had them watch and read Roots. Because you can't whitewash it. Kids have to understand how bad it was, so that when they hear and see of mistreatment of a people, they understand the brutality of it, and so that they understand that it was bad and that it wasn't a mistake and it wasn't a misunderstanding, that it was just the worst thing ever. So there's that. What were you taught about the Jim Crow South in school? What did you learn?
What was I taught about the Jim Crow South? I don't think I was taught anything. And if I was, it was, reading a book and answering questions about what you read, but there was nothing about the heart of it, because I'm an emotional person, so I connect with realness. And so it was just pages in a book that didn't even stick.
So how can I simplify what happened with the Jim Crow South? So slavery ended, and there were about 7 to 10 years where black people were like, cool, this is great. We're not slaves. Everything's great. They became state representatives immediately. We had people getting into the Congress, Senate, local sheriffs, things of that nature. And it was okay. Things were looking up. But when they wrote the amendments to the Constitutions that freed slaves, they wrote an exception. Slavery was illegal except for when somebody was a criminal and jailed. They could then, as a criminal who's in jail, be leased out to private individuals and corporations for slavery. Yeah. So what happened was they made these black codes. A black person could be arrested for loitering, which just meant standing somewhere. He could be arrested for not having a job. There was just these codes, and they were ridiculous. So more and more black people were being arrested and then being made to be slaves through the court system, and that was illegal. But that wasn't enough because black people were like, well, I'm just not going to be outside, and I'm going to make sure I'm gainfully employed if I have to, if we have to employ each other or whatever. So then the Jim Crow laws devised this whole separate but equal thing, and they started with the lawsuit of, I think it was Plessy versus Ferguson, and they just made another whole bunch of laws that said black people can do what they want, they can live their lives, but they can't do it mixed with us. So they can't drink from the same water fountain, they can't use the same part of the movie theater. They can get an education, but not side by side with our children. The Jim Crow laws legalized racial segregation for 100 years, from Civil War era until 1968. I was born in 1968. Yeah. So when they say slavery was a long time ago, slavery per se was a long time ago, but the slavery mentality only changed the year I was born. Now, I'm not that young, but I'm also not that old. What happened in the South is that people just fled Jim Crow, which is why black people migrated in huge numbers to big cities like Chicago. And did you know that they had to sneak away from the South, just like they had to sneak away when they were slaves? Because when they realized that black people were fleeing the South to get out of the Jim Crow laws, they stopped railroad trains. They were throwing them off of railroad cars. They were just finding any way they could to keep them from migrating north. So the whole family couldn't leave. They kind of sent the youngest men first. They kind of just had to disappear. They weren't watched as tightly as during slavery, but for black people to move north, it was usually the men went first and then the women would follow later. So that was the Jim Crow South. Yeah. Did you learn anything about Black Wall Street in school?
Did I learn anything about Black Wall Street in school? Nope. Not a clue what that is. That's a hard thing about wanting to learn, is not even knowing what to Google, not even having a starting place. I know I shouldn't be embarrassed, but I am. But it's never too late to start learning, right?
So I was never taught about Black Wall Street either. I didn't know it was a thing. And there's a reason that we weren't taught about Black Wall Street, because they like to tell us that when slavery ended, it ended. And then everybody got along. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Tulsa, Oklahoma, 1921. There was a wave of racial violence that destroyed an affluent African-American community, as it was seen as a threat to white-dominated American capitalism. Basically, the black people were doing so well on their own that the white people surrounded them felt super threatened by it. They lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma's Greenwood district, known as Black Wall Street, and it was one of the most prosperous African American communities in the United States. by on May 31st of 1921, the Tulsa Tribune reported that a black man named Dick Rowland had attempted to rape a white woman. They wanted to have someone justifiably lynched. They would scream rape. The woman's name was Sarah Page. White people refused to wait for the process to play out, and it just sparked 2 days of unprecedented racial violence. 35 city blocks were burned. 300 people were killed. 800 people were injured. And it was under the defense of white female virtue. And it was just their expression or their motivation for their racial violence. And here's why they were jealous. Black people just owned more stuff. There were 2 airports in Oklahoma, but 6 black families owned their own airplanes. Okay? They had the Ebony magazine described them as modern, majestic, sophisticated, and unapologetically black. They owned banks, hotels, cafes. They were clothiers. They owned movie theaters, and they owned contemporary homes. They had luxuries such as indoor plumbing, and they had an amazing school system, and the children were getting a superior education on their own with no help of the government. And the less fortunate white neighbors completely resented their lifestyle. And so a misunderstanding between a black man and a white woman in an elevator gave reason to just burn it all down. The police disregarded due process. They arrested black people and interned them in detention camps. And no white people were arrested at all. And they used the Klan to restore order. Okay, whatever. So here's the thing though. Greenwood, Oklahoma wasn't the only place this happened. This happened all over the country. It happened in Florida. I can't remember the name of the town in Florida. But the big problem people were having with the black people were that too many of them owned pianos. They owned pianos and their children were learning the arts. And that was a problem. They dragged everyone out of their homes. They killed a few. They took their pianos and they burned the houses. So this takes me to a conversation I used to have with my parents that used to make me very angry. Because in the 80s and 90s, mostly the 80s, my parents would say, the man doesn't want you to have that. Or don't let people know what you have. Or the man won't let you. And, I was just like, guys, you're being crazy. Because they were also letting me learn that slavery ended and everything was good. Slavery ended 200 years ago or whatever and everything was great. So I just thought my parents were being ridiculous. When I learned about Black Wall Street and similar affluent black areas being burned to the ground, I said, oh, is this what my parents meant when they said they won't let you have? Don't let people know what you have? Or, don't be too showy about, and it being well off of any kind. Don't let people know how smart you are and this and that. Was that what they meant? Somehow I think it was. What were you told was Martin Luther King's most important speech? Briefly, what did it say?
What was Martin Luther King's most famous speech, and can I quote something from it? The only speech that I'm aware of him giving was the I have a dream, that all men would be considered equal. To be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. But of course, it's really hard to remove oneself from what do I know now from what did I know, what was I taught all those years ago.
So we were all taught in school about Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. It was a very inspiring speech. You know, he had a dream that little white boys and little black girls, you know, he had a dream that white and black children could be hand in hand, and that all men would be judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. But then there's a speech called I've Been to the Mountaintop. It's the speech that got him killed. And I'm going to read a little bit to you. This is, in the middle of the speech. We don't have to argue with anybody. We don't have to curse and go around acting bad with our words. We don't need any bricks and bottles. We don't need Molotov cocktails. We just need to go around to those stores and these massive industries in our country and say, God sent us here to say to you that you're not treating his children right. And we've come by here to ask you to make the first item on your agenda, fair treatment, where God's children are concerned. Now, if you're not prepared to do that, we do have an agenda that we must follow, and our agenda calls for withdrawing economic support from you. And so, as a result of this, we are asking you tonight to go out and tell your neighbors to not buy Coca-Cola in Memphis. Go by and tell them to not buy seal test milk. Tell them not to buy, what is the other bread? Wonder Bread? And what is the other bread company? Jesse? Tell them not to buy Hart's bread. As Jesse Jackson has said, up till now, only garbage men have been feeling pain. Now we must kind of redistribute the pain. We are choosing these companies because they haven't been fair in their hiring policies. And we are choosing them because they can begin the process of saying they're going to support the needs and rights of these men who are on strike. And they can move on downtown and tell Mayor Loeb to do what is right. But not only that, we've got to strengthen black institutions. I call on you to take your money out of the banks downtown and deposit your money in Tri-State Bank. We want a bank-in movement in Memphis. So go by the Savings and Loan Association. I'm not asking you something that we don't do ourselves at SCLC. Judge Hooks and others will tell you that we have an account here in the Savings and Loan Association from the Southern Leadership Conference. We're just telling you to follow what we're doing. Put your money there. You have 6 or 7 black insurance companies in Memphis. Take out your insurance there. We want to have an insurance in. And so basically, in his last speech, the one that got him killed, he was looking back at how the bus boycott worked, and he was saying, let's just do this with all industries. Let's boycott companies that treat black people like garbage until they can do better. And some of that's even still refreshed today. People make an effort to buy black owned, and some people have a problem with that. But at the end of the day, if we're going to have equality, we have to cancel those companies that treat us bad. Now, I don't really believe in cancel culture. I kind of believe in counsel culture. But when counseling doesn't work, then we need to withdraw. And that was his most important speech. So, I look forward to seeing the finished collab that I did with the questions I asked for you. I hope you, Kate, enjoy how the collab you did with me turns out.
So thank you so much for doing this with me. I'm really looking forward to watching this video when it's done, seeing your answers and getting enriched. I know you have so much wisdom and knowledge to share, and it's so wonderful that you're doing it. And I hope that we can do this again sometime.
I will point you all to Kate's channel, and Kate will point you all to my channel. So I hope everyone learned something. And this is kind of what I do, as you can see from all of the history books right behind me, is I teach history. I teach to children, so I'm a little less brutal about it, but I use real source documents. You may have seen me reading. I pulled real source documents written by the people who wrote the things. I teach history from real documents and real information to my homeschooled brothers and sisters, children. So, with that said, take care.
Thank you. Hugs!
Until next time. This has been Epic Kate with Miss Andrea discussing American history. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.